We'll give it just a couple more minutes. All right, I am going to get started in one more minute. Yeah. All right. Welcome, folks, to Gardiner Regional Middle School's Parent Informational for school year 2020-21. My name is John LaPerry. I'm the building principal. And I'd like to introduce you to Tom Lambert. You should all know he's the assistant principal. Today, we are going to go through several areas. We are going to go through about 5 different parts of starting the school year, just to provide information to parents regarding the requirements for safely reopening the school. We'll also be talking about the learning scenarios and the yellow hybrid model that we'll be using September 8th as we get started, ready to start school. We'll also talk about the return to school learning expectations for students, teachers, and parents. We will talk about cohorts and how that's coming along and working. And then we'll discuss the enrollment verification that will be sent out on Thursday, August 20th. From there, we will finish up, at least the informational part of it, we will finish up with the daily routines at GRMS. There are some changes, and we really want to let the parents know in advance and the students what the routines will look like. During a significant part of this presentation, I will be presenting the information up on the screen for you. During that time, up in the right-hand side of your screen, there is a place to put questions. And as we go along, if you could ask questions that pertain to the information that we're going through, that way we can keep it structured and we don't kind of go off the tracks. And then at the end of the meeting, we will provide time for parents to ask further questions.
And John.
Yeah.
I also, and this is Tom Landberg, assistant principal speaking now. I also wanted to point in the direction of someone had put a message that they keep getting bounced off the meeting. Might be a good time to let people know that this will be recorded.
Yeah.
In case they are having technical difficulties during it.
Yeah. So we will have questions that you can post up in the corner, right-hand corner of your screen. At the end, if it's not 7 o'clock yet, we will continue to respond to those questions from parents. However, if 7 o'clock comes and we don't, and you still have questions, you can email myself or Mr. Lamberg your questions, and we will respond to you by phone or by email this week. And Tom is right, this is being recorded. So if you have something you have to do halfway through the meeting, you will be able to find it on the GRMS website and watch it at a later time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up today's information and we will begin. Again, I appreciate everyone that has shown up tonight. We currently have 74 families participating, 75. You may hear that occasionally as people come into the meeting. Hopefully it's not too much of a distraction, but we really appreciate you coming in and spending this time with us tonight so that we can provide the best information that we have to give tonight. As you know, this situation is fluid and things do change, and we will keep parents as updated as possible as we go along. So again, welcome to the GRMS parent meeting. We hope you had a great summer, and we hope you're ready for an interesting school year. All our presentations are being recorded for viewing time later. If you have any questions and concerns, again, please write them in the message box on the left of your screen. Also, if you have questions that weren't answered, please email myself or Mr. Lamberg, and we will do our best to get those answered this week as we go along through email or phone. So as we look at reopening the school, the first thing I'd like to talk about is that the school district has worked for the past 3 months to create a plan that allowed students to come back to school safely and also staff to come back to school safely. When the district decided to go into the hybrid plan, which we'll talk about as we go through, it's a really thoughtful plan that will allow us to keep your students safe during the school year and at the same time engage them 5 days a week in learning. So the requirements that we are under with the CDC guidelines and the DOE, we have 6 requirements for safe opening of schools. And the first one is safety screening at home before coming to school. We're asking parents and staff that all students and staff will be expected to complete a daily self-check prior to leaving home. And this includes within the past 24 hours if you've had a fever of 100.4 or above, or used any fever-reducing medicine. If you feel sick with any symptoms consistent with COVID-19, and we'll go through some of those symptoms, and I will show you a document that will go out to families so that you can look at the symptoms and check as you go. But some of them are coughs, shortness of breath. Have you been around anyone who's unwell? Or have you been in close contact with a person with COVID-19? And so what I'd like to show you is the pre-screening worksheet that will go to families, will be available to families. And this is just a quick check with your children in the morning. I know prior to coming to work, I will look at that myself and determine if I'm feeling any of these symptoms. So within 24 hours, have you had a fever of 100.4 above or used any fever-reducing medicine? If you answer that yes, we would ask you not to come to school. Do you feel sick with any of the most common symptoms? If you look at the symptoms on the right-hand side of the screen, chills, muscle pain, sore throat, new loss of taste or smell, nausea, vomiting, stomach pain, diarrhea, fatigue, headaches, rash, swelling or redness of hands and feet, red eyes, drainage, congestion, runny nose. If you answer yes to those, I would keep your child home. If you've been close to anyone with COVID-19 and you answer yes, please keep your child at home. And have you traveled outside the state in the past 14 days? If you answer yes, please contact the school before sending your child. Physical distancing within the facility. People need to remain in the school 3 to 6 feet apart whenever possible. Classrooms and cafeterias have been set up to accommodate this requirement. Lunch schedules and eating areas have been adjusted to abide by the 6-foot physical distancing when not wearing a mask while eating. And we'll go over the changes we've made within the building and within the cafeteria specifically as we go through the presentation. Identified medical isolation spaces. We have one down the hall and across from the nursing station, which is designated for students and staff who exhibit COVID-19 symptoms during the school day. And as many of you know, if you've been following the school board meetings, we are in the process of working on our ventilation system so that we ensure that we have proper ventilation in the school. Groups in any one area, room, or classroom must not exceed the governor's gathering size limits. This applies to school within 50-person limit per room within the school. This is a question that comes up or has come up. Face coverings. Masks or face coverings need to be worn by everyone 5 years and older during the school day. Masks are recommended for children 2 to 4 when developmentally appropriate, but not mandatory. And face masks and coverings must be worn by all students, including pre-K, while riding on the school buses. And we'll talk a little bit about the school buses as we go along. Masks and face coverings must cover the nose and the mouth. Face shields may be an alternate for students with documented medical or behavioral challenges who are unable to wear the mask or face covering. Face shields worn in place of face coverings must extend below the chin and back to the ears. And schools will provide information on the proper use, removal, and washing of face coverings. A clean mask should be worn daily.
So, Mr. L.
Yeah.
Mr. Landberg here again. I'm noticing on the chat room, and I'm sure people may have questions about the face coverings and masks. Those have kind of been around, so feel free to ask away. But in the chat, going back to our last subject, someone asked, if your child isn't feeling well, will they be able to attend classes virtually that day?
That is, well, our virtual learning is on Google Classroom. Our virtual learning is on Google Classroom, so they will have access to Google Classroom. I'm not sure yet if they will have anything in Google Classroom the days they're supposed to be here, but that's a question I will table, and I will certainly get back to you, Tom, if you have the parent's name.
I do.
Respond to that question. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the second question, and I think too, for that question, just to add what Mr. L said, it may be different for one teacher to the next. We really need to introduce this new model again with our students, this kind of hybrid model. So that was a really good question. The other one, Mr. L, I'll read it right now. If a child is kept home during the yellow hybrid model, will learning at home be available? How will that transition happen? Assume child may have to be home for 14 days. So once again, I think, we can speak to this and table this as well, is that during that time when a child is home, they're in the yellow model. It may be one of those days that they are to come to school, one of the 2 days that they come during the week. That's really something that right now I see as individual teachers handling that on a case-to-case basis, much like a student is missing from school in our previous traditional role. However, the difference is that we're now used to using Google Classroom, and we have the opportunity now to use this as a platform. I see it as a teacher-to-teacher basis, much like Mr. L was speaking as well, but it's truly something that we're going to have to discover. But we do have Google Classroom equipped with our teachers and students at this point, and we will moving forward.
And certainly, if a student's out for an extended period of time, we will ensure that learning is available to them on Google Classroom. Any other questions, Tom?
Nope, I don't see any right now, so we could probably move on from face coverings and masks. Yeah.
Okay. Hand hygiene. All students and staff will receive training, and that training will be by the nurse, training on proper hand hygiene. All students and staff, they'll need to wash their hands with a sanitizing gel or soap upon entering the building, before and after eating, after putting on or taking off their face coverings, after using the restroom, before and after use on the playground or shared equipment or physical education. And prior to getting on the school bus, we ask that parents ensure that their students had washed their hands prior to getting on the school bus. And of course, our students will at the end of the day before they go home. Another area that we've had some questions on, personal protective equipment. Additional safety precautions will be used by the school nurse and any other supporting staff supporting systematic students in close proximity when distance is impossible or when students require physical assistance. These will include wearing eye protection, face shields, goggles, and mask coverings. Classrooms or other areas have been used by an individual diagnosed with COVID-19 will be closed off until it's thoroughly cleaned and sanitized. Sanitation takes place. And so what I'd like to do is kind of walk parents through the process that will be used in the event of a student illness at school. And that would be a situation if a student was dropped off, didn't have a fever, parents sent him to school or her to school, and went up to the teacher sometime in the day and expressed that they weren't feeling well.
Mr. L.
Yeah.
As you're speaking and someone piped in and said, can we table the questions at the end? I think that's great. If your question doesn't get answered right off, we'll guarantee that it will get covered by the end or after the meeting. But I thought this was a good one just to pull out, Mr. L.
Yeah.
When a student's exhibiting cold symptoms and they're kept home, what is the protocol for them to return? Is it that 24-hour symptom-free?
Yeah, and we're going to go to that in just a minute.
Perfect.
That's part of the presentation. But if a child is sick at home or looks unwell, and the school nurse is available, the staff will notify the school nurse. The school nurse will assess the student for COVID-like symptoms. If they have COVID-like symptoms, they'll apply a surgical mask and isolate the student. And the room that would put a student in if they did have any COVID-like symptoms, it's an office. It's got ventilations. It's got a window that can open up. We plan to have a bed in there and some chairs in there, so the student will be comfortable while they're waiting. And once they're in that room, we'll call the parents to pick them up as soon as possible. And of course, we'll advise the parents to call their medical provider. If the student says no, or the nurse realizes they're not COVID-like symptoms, we'll treat it as a routine illness and care. We'll send the information to the parents for the illness care. We'll return to class with a little bit of heightened awareness, and we'll record the visit as we usually do. Now, of course, if the nurse isn't available, then we'll notify a designated staff member, which is myself or Mr. Lambert, someone in the office. We'll check for symptoms. And if they have symptoms, a cough, appears feverish, a sore throat, any other COVID symptoms, we'll also apply a mask, provide a mask for the child, and put them in an isolation. And of course, if the child is experiencing difficulty breathing or chest pains or new confusion and difficulty concentrating, we would call 911 and call the parent as well. So return to school after illness. And this is where this will answer some of the questions. A non-COVID-19 illness, students should not return to school unless they are fever-free for 24 hours without using a fever-reducing medication and symptom-free for 24 hours. And that would even go to if the student had any COVID-like symptoms, I would wait 24 hours until those symptoms have gone away before you send them back to school. Now, with COVID-19 illness, you'll find this when the student handbook is sent home for the return to school guidelines on page 8 to 10, you'll find the information that I'm going to share. So if a student has COVID-19 illness, Under the current Maine CDC guidelines, a student that was tested positive for COVID-19 will not be able to return to school until these things happen. The student has gone 24 hours, 1 day without exhibiting symptoms of COVID-19, and at least 10 days have passed since the student's symptoms first appeared. Or the student has received 2 negative COVID-19 tests from specimens taken more than 24 hours apart. And documentation of medical clearance will be required to return to school and must be submitted to the school nurse. Students that have had close contact at home and monitor symptoms for 14 days. Close contact is defined as any individual who has been closer than 6 feet for more than 15 minutes to a person that has COVID-19. And depending on the circumstances, this could include an entire classroom, a club, a bus, playground groupings, cafeteria groupings. Students returning from illness related to COVID-19 will be required to check in with the school nurse and school administration. And then 6 staff members and students must use home isolation until they meet the criteria for returning back to school. Do we have any questions around COVID-19 and students that are sick, Tom?
Not yet. Couple of questions I was able to type in. So if you were able to type questions, I did type you an answer. We can keep going.
Okay, so the learning plans and scenarios. Let's take a look here. So as many of you know, there are 3 learning structures. We have green, where all students are in the school, a hybrid model where we have about half the kids in the school, and we also have a remote model where students are learning directly from home. We, as a district, was approved by the school board that we would go into a yellow hybrid model, which I think is a really measured approach to bringing kids back to school, especially after the spring. To me, I always use the analogy, it's kind of like dipping your toe in the water to see if it's safe or to see if it's just right for you. And so there are some guidelines in the yellow zone that we have to adhere to by the CDC. Of course, there's fewer students in the school at a time. Masks will be worn by all, and students must be 3 to 6 feet physical distance in measure. Routine hand washing throughout the day, and we kind of went through the times that you would need to wash your hand. Additional cleaning routines. The janitorial staff, the maintenance staff of the school will be cleaning nightly, disinfecting the building. In the classroom, teachers will be disinfecting surfaces, hard surfaces in the classroom before other classes come in that room. Outdoor mask breaks will be available, and we'll talk about this throughout the day. And those mask breaks will be indoor when the weather's inclement. And cohorts are organized, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as we move on, to help household groups as much as possible. The district will determine cohort assignments. We've been working on that for a couple of weeks now. And by the start of January and by June 4th, the cohorts have the same number of person. So from now until we are out of yellow, the cohorts will remain the same amount of kids in the classroom. In person, the number of kids in person days across the year, if we had to remain in yellow. So the yellow really provides 5 days of learning for students. If you're in cohort A, your student would be in school on Monday and Tuesday. They would be home learning remotely Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And the students on Thursday and Friday that are in cohort B would be in school in the classroom with teachers learning. So 5 days a week, your students will be provided instruction. The 2 days in the classroom and the 3 days will be, although it may be, they may have to go onto certain links to watch different videos or to read certain text, but all the learning within those 3 days that they are home will be new learning that will help prepare them for when they come back with their teachers. So 5 days a week, we will provide new learning for your students. We will be grading on a traditional grading, 1 to 100, and we will be taking attendance will be taken whether they're home or they are in school. The away or while they're at home attendance, we're still working on, but that will be provided also.
Mr. O.
Yep.
Not sure, did you mention the remote academy? Specifically, someone was inquiring to see if it would be ready for the start of the school year, which I do believe it will be. But I didn't know if there were any updates on the remote academy and how that's coming along.
No, the remote academy is we're still working on it. It will be ready by the time school starts. Currently, we're putting cohorts of teachers that will be working specifically with the kids that are deciding not to come back to the building this year or this quarter. So we are working on that as we speak, and those students will have a specific cohort of teachers that are working just with them.
Okay. And the other question is, will there be a day to pick up laptops prior to day one for those who are in cohort A or B?
Well, the students in cohort A, and can we hold on to that until we get to the laptop piece, Tom?
Sure thing.
Yeah. Okay. So learning to return to school expectations in green, red, and yellow have been created just to provide some structure to the learning. And so if we're starting in a yellow, and that's in-person learning by cohorts. And again, as I said, cohort A meets on Monday and Tuesday. Cohort B meets on Thursday and Friday, following safety guidelines, including wearing masks in person, remote learning on non-cohort days, and educator office hours. So on Wednesday, teachers are available, and those times will go out to students to answer questions that they may have of the teachers during that day. And so as we go through the expectations for learning, educators will provide purposeful, engaging new instruction via weekly in-person and virtual lessons and assignments to ensure progress toward year-end goals. The elementary schools are using Seesaw. We're using Google Classroom. Students are familiar with it. And the plan for teachers is they plan on providing instruction to students on how to use Google Classroom. What are the pieces that they'll be expected to be able to master and use, so that students can navigate Google Classroom hopefully much better than they were able to navigate it in the spring. The district is also going to provide families, and that's still in the works, with Google Classroom instruction, so that while you're at home with your student, you'll be able to help them navigate that platform. Teachers will also provide meaningful feedback and timely feedback on assignments. Be available, as I said, during office hours to help students and families. They'll be responding to emails within a timely manner. Clearly communicate learning expectations, assignments, and deadlines so that students know what's expected. In the building, they'll follow math protocols, instruct in a space that allows students to focus on learning in quiet spaces, and also post a class schedule for both in-class and remote. So students will know when they should be working on instruction. To keep some structure in the day for those students. And students will attend and actively participate in the learning in a class and on remote learning days. Again, attendance will be taken and expected and taken on an in-person or remote days. When learning is remote, when learning remotely, attend in a space that allows you to focus on your learning with the laptop and any necessary learning materials that you need as a student, quiet space, and have a charged laptop ready for learning when you're at home and when you're at school. And we'll talk about the laptop process and how it's changing a little bit from last year. Again, while students are in a remote and in school, to be respectful during all virtual learning experiences. Your microphone is muted upon entry into the classroom and when not speaking. be actively engaged through the chat box or oral responses, and this is for remote learners. And your phone should be silenced. And of course, please dress appropriately in a public presentation when if you're on Google Meets. Follow mask protocols when you're in the building. Communicate with teachers whenever you have a question. Certainly reach out to your teachers through Google Classroom and through email if you have questions for them. And work with your teachers and with your families to create and maintain that daily schedule. It will be really important this fall to maintain, when you are home, to maintain a structure in your learning. It's easy to fall behind with, if you don't provide yourself that structure. And I know as middle schoolers, you certainly can do that. Families, support your children with rituals and routines to complete assignments and work so that they don't fall behind. Help your children and have a charged laptop ready for learning when at home and when at school. And work to provide a quiet and distraction-free environment as much as possible. And sometimes it's challenging. Over the summer, I've had my in-laws with me and my both daughters with me, and working from home was challenging. And understand that basic navigation requirements for the designated learning platforms. And again, as I said, the school district's going to provide some learning for parents so that you know how to navigate Google Classroom as well. And support the learning environment as much as possible to encourage participation and on-task behavior. And the last two is communicate with teachers. Whenever you have a question, please, parents, reach out to teachers if you have a question or you're confused about something. It's much easier to ask as soon as you have questions than waiting a day or two. And then check the school website for frequent updates. We will try to keep parents updated as possible throughout the school year. And I understand this is really trying for all of us, teachers, parents, kids, and please do your best to support your children as when they are here and when we're online with them. We will do everything we can to provide the best learning instruction support we possibly can. And again, we know that dynamics in a family may have drastically changed with some parents at home, some working on the front lines, and we understand there are challenges at home when your kids are home learning. Any questions on that piece, Tom?
Not right now. I'm able to type in a couple of answers to some things that people are asking. So we'll continue to go forward. If people feel like I didn't answer their question in just the chat box, it might require a little bit more discussion. I can reach out to you, or you can give us a call or shoot us an email. We can talk. So, yeah.
So regarding cohorts, and I've had a lot of calls on cohorts and how cohorts are being used. And so we have been working for about 2 weeks principals across the district, trying to organize our cohorts to meet families' needs. And so, for an example, Mr. Kempton at the high school created cohorts for his kids that went from A to K would be cohort A, L to Z would be cohort B, and then of course cohort C are kids that are just learning remotely. So we have worked on these cohorts to try to align them to meet the needs of families. Again, there have been situations where kids, if a boy with the last name of Baker lives with a family with the last name of Lamberg, and most of the kids are Lambergs, we would move that Baker into the Lamberg cohort. So we've made those adjustments to make sure that we sought out and found kids that were connected to families so that it would make it easier for you to send your kids all on the same day. So those are currently being entered in PowerSchool, and we will be sending cohort assignments out to parents as soon as possible. So you will get a letter in the mail with your cohort assignments. It will also have a letter from me that will have an attached map, and we're going to talk about arrivals. So we'll have an attached map that will show you a little bit different take on how we're dropping off students, or how parents would drop off students. The busing is pretty much staying the same as where buses drop off, but we'll talk about that in a minute. And then please expect on Thursday, an enrollment verification will be sent out to all families. And it's kind of a survey that's going to ask you to decide whether you want your student in the hybrid model in school, or if you want them to be learning completely remotely. That survey will go out on Thursday, August 20th, and please respond to it as soon as possible so we can take that information and wrap up our process of cohorting kids and getting information out to families. So this is really important to kids because they want to know, what is it going to look like when I come to school? And we are doing our best with the restrictions, with the requirements we have from the CDC and the DOE to make school as normal as possible for kids. So when students arrive at school, staff will be greeting them as we always do off the bus, and we'll be supervising for physical distancing while students enter the building and while they move to their homerooms. Last year, students would go to the cafeteria, they would get breakfast, and at a certain time they would go to homerooms. This year, they will go directly to homerooms, and they will check in with their teachers. So kids will not go to the cafeteria. Our food service is putting a plan together to provide students that need breakfast or want breakfast to be able to provide them 5 breakfasts a week to have at home prior to coming to school. But that information will be coming out soon. Bus drop-offs will be staggered by grade level. So we're going to do our best to stagger students off the bus. And we're still working on that based on the amount of students that are on the bus and how they are in the bus. But we will be sending kids up the hall the best we can by grade level. And then parents are asked to enter the property. Parents are going to drop students off in the back of the building. And if you remember how we did the laptop drop off and pickup, parents will now, instead of by the office, they'll be dropping off their students at the back of the building where you can walk to the cafeteria or where you would walk to get to the gymnasium lobby. That walkway between the 2 buildings is where students will walk and check in. And so parents, if you could come in the entrance closest to I-95 and ensure that you exit on the complete opposite side of the building. That way we have free flowing traffic and we're not interfering with bus arrivals as well. I think extending the drive to the back of the building is going to allow, it's going to hopefully reduce the congestion in the entrance that we've had year after year and allow that line to stretch out a little bit so buses can get in. And I think, I hope parents find that to be a much better process than in previous years. When students enter the building, when entering the building, all students will have hand sanitizer to wash their hands as they come in. There'll be supervision of students throughout the building to help them maintain that 6 feet distance. We are already preparing to put signage throughout the building just to remind students to maintain that physical distancing, wear masks, and wash hands. And those are the 3 really core things that we want to ensure that students are doing daily. Because if we do the things necessary and based on the guidelines, I think we'll be in good shape throughout this year. Classroom setups. Students will notice a difference in the classroom. Classroom furniture has been minimized to allow for appropriate spacing of student seating. And all student seating will be spaced at least 3 feet apart, 3 to 6 feet apart. Adults will maintain a distance of 6 feet during direct instruction. Again, classroom surfaces will be disinfected between each period for the safety of students and staff. And students will be on a staggered dismissal to transition between classes. And what that means is we're not going to put all the kids out in the hallway as they transition between classes. The teams will be working on a staggered process where we allow a certain amount of kids out in the hallway at a time so that they can transition from class to class. There is 5-minute transition time built into the schedule. So for that transition, because it's going to be different than it usually is, we're putting 5 minutes into that time so that teachers can structure that and kids can move from classroom to classroom in a safe manner. And the class schedule will remain pretty much the same. And we'll look at that. I'm going to scroll down. We'll look at that schedule with the exception of the transition time between periods and an extended lunch. And I'll walk through why we extended the lunch. So the student schedule will look pretty much the same We will still have Falcon time. Lunches will still be by grade level. The difference this year with the lunches is because of CDC guidelines, we cannot have more than 50 people in the cafeteria. Each team on a yellow model has, I would say, about 35 to 40 students on a team, closer to 40. And so we needed to split the lunch so that each team, so as an example on this, Hermitage and Moosehead go to lunch at 11:40 to, and it is completely over by, 10:40, and it's completely over by 11:25. Hermitage will go to lunch while Moosehead goes to recess. And what we're doing is we are going to have, when Hermitage is at lunch and it's time to go to recess, they will walk out the cafeteria door and stay on the right-hand side of the pathway, while Team Moosehead comes up the left side of the pathway into the gym lobby door and enters the cafeteria. This allows a 20-minute lunch and a 20-minute recess for all students. And it allows us to have students eating in the cafeteria safely, but still with their friends. Student laptops, and a lot of students are interested in this part. Each student will be issued a laptop of their own. Laptops will be brought home and back to school each day. Students will be responsible for charging that laptop at home and to bring it back fully charged when they return in the morning. And the reasoning behind this is that laptop cart, for one, takes up a lot of space in the classroom. And what we don't want is kids reaching in one at a time into the laptop cart to grab their laptop. This way, once they have their laptop, they have their case, it's theirs. They're holding on to it all the time. They charge it and make sure it's 100% charged before they leave school. And then when they come to school, they're ready for learning. And when they get back home, they just plug it in for the night. And there'll be training for both students and families, as I said, on Google Classroom. The teachers will provide that training for students on Google Classroom when they arrive, so that teachers can use it while students are here in school. And it will be seamless for them to use, or our hope is it will be seamless for them to use as they go home for that remote learning piece. Any questions so far, Tom?
A couple of questions, but nothing that can't wait until the end.
Okay.
So if you want to keep going, and we'll have these questions coming in. I'm taking some notes to answer at the end.
Yeah, we're almost at the end. So mass breaks. Regular mass breaks will be provided throughout the day. There will be a minimum of 4 mass breaks during the day. During mass break, staff will take students outside during these times. It's preferred to take the students outside during mass breaks. However, during inclement weather, these breaks can be inside. But when they're inside, the students must maintain that 6 feet social distance or physical distancing. So students will have mass breaks throughout the day. And I know that's something that parents have been concerned about. So we will certainly provide them breaks, especially as we're first getting into school and people are, just starting to really get used to wearing masks. Lunch and recess, I really talked about already. Students will be sitting 6 feet apart in the cafeteria, and out at recess, if they won't have their masks on as long as they can maintain that 6 feet physical distancing. And finally, dismissal. We're still working out the procedures of dismissal, but much like arrival procedures, we'll use a staggered approach to dismissing students. When picking up your student, we ask you to notify the main office like you always have. However, you will be picking students up at the back gym door. Would also ask that you enter the school property again for dismissal, entering in through the I-95 side of the building, closest to I-95, and exiting out the other side. And I think that is it, Tom.
Okay.
We can certainly open it up to questions.
Sure thing. Couple things that came up in the chat, which I really appreciate people utilizing, and I think they're all great questions. It really gets us thinking here. One in particular, somebody had mentioned teachers' timely responses. A lot of our kids are going to be independently working, not with a parent by their side. Either they're going with their parent to work or they're home without their parent who's at work. Um, we are getting a little better at this, and we're not fully remote. I think the challenge was before was that we never really had that face-to-face contact. And for our students, where we have a great relationship with them, we really work towards that. Seeing them at least a couple of times a week can help shore those things up. So we'll make sure to be real timely with our responses. Also, on Wednesdays, somebody had asked, Wednesday may be a little bit different. The teachers are going to be available online. On those other off days when students are home, of course, our teachers are teaching the other half of the cohort. So they won't be online and available. But those Wednesdays, teachers may plan to do things. It'll look different depending on the teacher here at the middle school. There was another question about the remote academy teachers. So if your son or daughter is strictly online and not in person learning to start the school year, we have not yet determined who those teachers are. However, they are teachers who will be dedicated to remote learning. So someone had asked, so if my student is a remote learner and going to learn online, will they have Team Hermitage in the 6th grade? The answer is no, because we will dedicate specific teachers and specific subjects to that remote learning effort.
Yeah,
and then also,
Tom,
yes.
also note on that, those teachers will be MSAD 11. They will be from the middle school teachers on that cohort.
Yep. Yep. So that's an excellent point made by Mr. L. They'll be our certified teachers in the building. Your son or daughter may very well have had them or will have them at some point. So we do have people dedicated to that. Someone had asked about the bus and the parents perhaps going in different directions. We will come up with a map, so we'll have a visual of how our pickup and drop off go about, but we do plan for parents dropping off and buses to go in the same direction in a similar fashion. That may change, but we are thinking about how students are getting dropped off.
Yeah, and Tom, to speak to that, we have always had coming in that entrance closest to I-95, parents dropping off students and buses coming in. And buses are pretty, they come in at a little burst, 3 or 4 buses at a time. So we will have people down by that exit because parents now will not be turning around and going out the same exit. And as we begin, we will have people down there just to keep an eye on parents coming down through that, if you're looking at the building, right side of the building, and exiting as we have buses in the line.
Okay. And also,
that whole process was used several years ago as well, and it seemed to work quite well.
yes. Yep. Also, someone had asked a question about where we were hurried into remote learning in the spring. What type of training are our teachers getting? And I know, Mr. L, you've been involved with our upcoming training that's coming about for teachers. And I believe it's 8 days that teachers will be in the building, working remotely, getting training for what we're about to endure. So typically, we only have about 2 days to prepare for the school year. Altogether, as a staff, we're looking at a pretty beefed up professional development over 8 days. So that should benefit us entering this yet again, a new realm. But think of it, in the spring and March, we were really thrown into it and we didn't expect it.
And that professional development plan just went out today, so I'm not 100% familiar with everything in there, but I do know there is training for teachers using the Google platform platform, and there are new elements of Google Meets and Google Classroom, and so they're going to be trained on those areas that have been just introduced by Google, based on, and my assumption, and I'm sure Terry could verify, based on the challenges we've had from COVID-19 since March. There have been adjustments made by Google.
Okay. Did we speak to Mr. L? Did we speak to the laptops and how quickly we're going to get those out at the beginning of the school year?
Yeah, we plan on getting those out as soon as possible. We haven't talked about the students that are on cohort B and will they have them prior to that day? And that answer is no. I see Terry shaking her head. But the plan is as soon as kids get in the classroom, they will be provided their laptop by their teacher. Our IT coordinator in the building will provide that initial talk to the kids about proper use of laptops and how to bring it home, making sure it's charged and the importance of that. That will happen within that first day.
I have to give kudos to Mr. Anderson, who is responding to new learning, saying that that could be ambiguous, meaning that new may just be a continuation of the same content or skills, just different actions for the student. So when we talk about those days that students are home and not getting in-person learning, that's those 2 days a week. And then on that Wednesday, we're really making a plan for students to be successful in school, from what they've done for practice, maybe the previous 2 days, and then also looking ahead to the next week of learning where they're only going to get 2 days as well. There's something to be said about, as a learner, preparing for what's coming the next week. And a lot of our mathematics instruction is inquiry-based. It's problem solving. It's not the way we used to do math where you get the worksheet and the paper and you're writing things down. The teacher may be asking students specifically on those days that they're not at school to be thinking and anticipating the next lesson. So our students here in middle school have some skills behind them. They've had quite a bit of schooling so far. We're really going to push them to not just practice what they've learned from those previous 2 days, but also to prepare and be ready as a learner to approach the next 2 days. So right. This is the new way.
So Tom, we have 7 minutes left. And if you could kind of look at some questions that can reach globally, like all parents may have this question. If you could look at the questions based on that. And certainly, folks, if you have questions specific to you or just questions you want answered in general, please send us emails. We will be responding over the next 3 days by phone and by email to answer your questions as best we can.
Here's a good one, John, Mr. L.
Yeah.
We have kind of back to the entry questions. If a student has a parent that they live with that has been out of state, let's say for a business trip, a vacation, visiting family, and then they come back into the state to live with that student, will that be a problem?
Yeah, I don't have the list of states where you have to quarantine for 14 days, but if a parent has gone out of state and has come back home, and I'll check with our nurse, I'll check with Denise on that and respond to that question. But to the best of my knowledge, the student wouldn't be, if they were near that parent, the student wouldn't be able to come to school. I'll check on that and I'll get that out to families so that they have clarification on that. But that's my understanding.
Okay, couple of good questions about students getting picked up in the middle of the day. What does that look like? Does the parent have to come into the school?
Yeah. We wouldn't have the parent, just as we always have, the parent calls the school, we'll have your student ready, and you could pick them up in the back of the building.
Okay. So these procedures, everyone, are going to be ironed out prior to school. They're not going to be perfect, but again, our chief concern here is keeping your son or daughter safe while at school. That's our chief concern, and we hope to get to the learning as well. But that's our priority, at least to start the school year. It'll be a very different beginning. Other questions?
Let me provide clarity on that. As I thought through that question about picking them up in the back of the building, we will put that in our information that goes out, because certainly as I think about it, if we have recess in the back of the building, midday, that's probably not a good place to pick up students. So we would have parents pick them up at the office. If it's an early pickup, if it's at the end of the day, it would be in the back of the building. The process would be still the same. Call the office. We'll make sure your student's ready. If it's midday, then they'll be picked up at the office. If it's at the end of the day, dismissal, it'll be the back of the building.
Okay, so those things, is particularly if you're somebody who we have some parents who regularly dismiss students on certain days if they have an appointment. Those things will get ironed out. People are asking about bus schedules. Those are going to be forthcoming.
Yep, those are still done.
Yeah. In terms of school sports, I've been a part of our athletics committee. It's an offshoot of our return to school set by our superintendent. The athletics committee is really getting information from the Maine Principals Association. And essentially someone also writes that there's a Kennebec Journal article today about where the MPA is talking about school sports. The difficulties that we're having right now is we're in a phase where our student athletes are working with coaches at the high school level, not at the middle school level, but all of that is for training purposes. We don't really have any guidance at this time beyond training for school sports. We only know that the school sports date has been moved up to a start date of September 8th for the high school. However, from what we're hearing and being on that athletics committee and talking with our athletic director, Nate Stubbert, school sports at the high school level are in jeopardy right now. They may not be able to pull that off because of all the strict things that are going on with the social distancing and the masking. As you can imagine, there's also a question here about physical education in our building, where we're to wear masks all day and stay 6 feet apart. Again, unless it's aerobic and distant and individual, it's really difficult to pull off. So we are working on that as a district, but we're really, stalled at this point because the guidance isn't there right now.
Yeah, and just to speak to phys ed, we are working on how we can provide physical education for kids. We do have a significant space outside. We'll be working with our physical education teachers on a plan to meet the needs of the kids through physical education. We don't know what it's going to look like. We've got a lot of conversations. We've got to look at the guidelines and see what we can do with physical education, and that will be talked through over the next couple of weeks.
Yep. Another one is snow days. We're hoping to take care of those. A lot of schools have already done that. So we're hoping that if we have a snow day, we can go fully remote. That is not set in stone, but that would be something that we would like to do. Couple other questions here, but
Tom, we have time for one more. It is 6:59.
All right. Let's see. I'll take the next one. Can you please clarify which entrance is closest to I-95?
Yeah, I can do that. If you are looking at the building, if you're standing on Cobbossee Avenue and you're looking at GRMS, it would be the entrance to your left, right next to the landscaping company. Again, folks, I really appreciate 70 to 80 families coming to the meeting tonight. I hope we provided you with some sense of calm and understanding that we are going to do our very best to provide quality instruction in a safe environment for your students next year, or this year, should I say. If you have any questions, please reach out to Mr. Lamberg and I, and we will answer and respond to your questions as soon as we possibly can. Again, have a great night and a great weekend. Enjoy the sun. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.